What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the first installment of a new series that I'm going to be doing here on the channel of mix breakdowns. Every song that I upload, I'm going to try to do a mix breakdown for it so that I can take you through all of the individual processing for all the different tracks that we have going on, so you can sort of see how I reached the end result of all of these tracks. So let's go ahead and just dive right into it. We'll start off with what's on the pre-master and master chains. Mastering isn't really anything too crazy. We have an EQ that is a model of a piece of hardware. We have, and that's doing just a little bit of a volume cut, good mid scoop, and a nice bump in the low end. And then we have Blue Cat's Patchwork, which is basically a parallel processing chain plugin. So we've got Pro MB going on in here, crushing the absolute hell out of this, but only at about a 30% mix. Volume, balancing the volume over here. We have that running into another more specified EQ to bring some clarity. This right here is something that I use when I'm actively doing mixing, just to sort of focus my attention to the low end, the mid range, or the high end. And so as you can see, the last time I had it on, I was using it to really focus on everything below 225, make sure that our low end was nice and clear. So ultimately, this is not something that was on during the final chain. And then we're just running that into Pro L2. We have it no true peak on the modern style, pushing it in by about 8 decibels. So really trying to make it loud here. So you can take these off real quick just so you can hear the difference. So without this, and with it. You know, obviously we'll leave the limiter on. We'll take these guys off so you can hear the differences that they make. Aside from the volume change, it just makes everything sound a little bit more focused. And then with this guy, if we take it to 100%, so it's bringing in a little bit of meat, helping again give it a level of clarity that it didn't necessarily have before. And then we have this third EQ here. And that one is also doing a lot of work to really bring out more and more clarity. All the things that are on the master bus are ultimately just about making sure that everything is clear, everything is audible, and that you don't have any instruments or any ideas that are hidden in the mix. Pre-master bus, got a handful of things going on here. To begin with, we've got the VMR, and this is a lot of these ideas, like this particular chain, is something that I was trying out, that I had watched from Buster Otohome in a couple different Nail the Mix episodes. So we've got a custom series EQ giving us a nice boost at 100 hertz, really fattening up the low end. We're pushing it not terribly hard into a British Neve console emulation mix bus. We've got it at about plus 11.5 on the drive in, and then with the input output balance, we're only pushing it at about 1.5 decibels, and then trimming just a hair to keep us completely out of the red. So without this on, without everything on the mix chain, just given this really just gives a nice low end fatness that wasn't quite there before. This guy right here is just a little tilt shelf at less than a decibel at 0.74 decibels. And this is because all the things that we're going to be doing after this are going to continue adding low end. So we just want to kind of balance out what's going on in the rest of the sonic footprint here. Brightens things up as they go into the next set of processing. Then we have OTT, which is a multiband compressor. We've got the upward compression all the way down. We only have it at a mix of about 20%. We're not really pushing it in or out any harder. I really use the volume in out of the VMR to try to balance what's going into the plugin. So at 100% it sounds like this, which is nuts. We only have it at about 20%. And this actually brings out a really nice like mid focus with a lot of shine to it. We have that rolling into the FG Gray, fast attack, fast release, 4:1 ratio, and we are high passing it up to 58 hertz, pushing it in. Our makeup gain is at about 8 decibels, so we're really slamming the hell out of it here. So without it is here. And then with it, just fills it out really nicely. Mixes at 100%. We're running that into the Relight Pro here, which is just a tape saturation emulator. We have it open all the way, low and high. It doesn't even look like I have it pushed. Just having it rolling through the plugin is doing enough. Again, filling it out, giving it some more harmonics, really thickening up that low end. And then more saturation. We have that running into the warm tape setting on Saturn II. Drive is only at about 30%. We're not messing with the EQ at all. We're not pushing it in any harder. This is just stock 1 decibel gain reduction that it always has when you open up Saturn. And all that saturation really does a lot of work for the mix in total. So if we take everything off, right? And then bring it all on. It's a pretty significant difference between each of them. And so we're going to leave the pre-master and master stuff on while we go through the rest of the individual tracks. And with that said, we can move on to the drums. The drums have a lot of stuff going on for them. They're probably the most processed next to like the vocals, just in terms of the amount of things that are on everything. All of my drums are done using GGD Invasion. The original preset is, I believe, what they have called the Low Tuned Brute. Yeah, and this is essentially that preset with the third tom taken off. So it's all of the low tuned versions of each tom. We're running with the Black Beauty snare, the 14 by 6.5. And then a few of the cymbal choices are mixed out and changed. I've got the larger china. I've got all the really larger cymbals. The biggest thing for me, especially with the hats, is going with these serpent hats, the 14-inch serpent hats. The fast hats really don't have the nice ring from the cymbals that I enjoy, so I always make sure to change those out. But then I just change out all of the cymbals as is necessary depending on the mix. You've got like 2 or 3 different rides that you can use. Each of these cymbals, I think, has at least a minimum of 1 other option, in some cases 2. So it gives you a lot of customization options in terms of making the kit sound how you want it. I also believe the kick is changed out from the one that they use for the preset. Using the Pearl Masters Birch 22 by 16. I think originally the Low Tuned Brute comes with the Star Classic Babinga 22 by 18. Since it is a deeper shell, it does give you a much lower tone. It has a lot more low end in it. And usually with a lot of metal stuff, you end up mixing a lot of that out, and you want something that's a little bit more mid-focused, just in terms of tonality. So I go with the Pearl Birch 22 by 16 because it initially already has the character that I'm looking for. And then I route all of these to individual channels and record them out into audio so that I have individual channels that I can actually run everything with. It's also a lot lower CPU load having everything bounce down to audio as opposed to constantly having Kontakt running in the background while I'm doing everything. So starting with just the kick, this is the kick in and sub kick routed to the same channel through Invasion for our kick sum. And then the kick trig is the trigger that is preloaded into Invasion that I also just have bounced down to audio. In the mixer, in the plugin, I will have the two usually at equal volume so that I can volume mix them together myself. So as you can see, the trigger here, I have it down 8 decibels from it coming in at probably 0. And then this is the real kick, and I only have that brought down about a decibel to keep it from clipping. So this is just the kick with all the processing on it. The sum itself, which is the kick in and sub, is EQ'd this way. We've got a nice boost on the clicky area. We're cutting out a whole lot of that like basketball sounding 200 hertz area with a small boost in the 135 area because we're really just wanting to scoop this out, but I found that doing it with too deep of a cut doesn't quite give the same effect that I'm going for. And then I have this scoop here at 800 that a lot of times I'll end up using depending on which of the kicks I'm actually using out of GGD. In this case, it really didn't need it. We wanted a lot more of that mid sound here, so I didn't bother with it. And then we have that running into the CLA 3A, really whacking the hell out of it. I love this compressor for drums. I think it does awesome things. I really think it brings the life out of a lot, like almost all drum ideas. I think I have it on literally every bus for all of my shells. I just think it's a phenomenal compressor. It sounds great. So just the sum. This is no EQ, no compression. And then add the EQ in. It's just a little bit brighter. And then we add in the compression. And just gives it a really, really nice smash. It makes everything cut a little bit better. Yeah, I really, really, really enjoy the way that compressor sounds. The trigger doesn't have anything done to it. It's just volume balanced with the kick sum in order to help create some consistency in the low end. Both of those are run into an instance of Pro C2. We are getting a fair amount of compression here, but we're just trying to make sure that the trigger and the sum are nicely mated together. And then we have a utility volume balancing on the other side of the plugin. And that is that for the kick. It's not too much going on. I really like the way these drums sound, and aiming to sort of match in certain ways the mix style of the original track. I didn't want to go too overboard in terms of processing on the drums, because the processing initially on that first, like on the original Take This Life track, it's all very raw sounding. So I didn't want to, as much as I wanted to bring it into like the modern era, I didn't want to overdo the way any of that was set up. Moving to the snare, I have the top, bottom, and trigger mics. Well, top and bottom mics and the trigger bounced out to audio. These are all the initial things straight from Invasion. And then I have two samples that I tend to utilize when doing metal mixes in particular. I have this sample, which is actually something that I crushed together from several different other drum samples to create a one shot that I really like to use, just to sort of add some thickness and depth to my snares. And then the other one is the Impact Snares maple snare drum from Odahome Audio. It's one of the free snare packs that you can get from them. It comes with 2 or 3 snare drums. And this one, this is the processed one that has a room built into it and everything. And I just absolutely love the way this snare sounds. It helps give a really nice, raw, open room sound to your snare that I feel like is necessary for a lot of like metal mixes. Just it really, really adds so much to the overall snare sound. So fully processed, this is what the snare sounds like. If we take away the extra samples, so a lot of the dimension that we get in our snare drum comes from these extra samples. They're doing a lot of heavy lifting. Snare top, we've got an EQ scooping out a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of the mid focus actually right over the transient. It just gets rid of a lot of the ringiness that exists in the snare that doesn't actually sound all that good. And then we've got that fed into the CLA3A, pushing it pretty hard. Really, really brings out the transient information in it. and with the way that it squishes, you get more sustain out of it. Like I said, the 3A is just one of my favorite compressors to use on shells. And then we have that running into Decapitator. Pushing it kind of hard. We've got the Punish on. We're low cutting up to... I forgot this doesn't give an actual readout here. The high is open all the way. We're cutting, I think, up to, if not just past the actual transient, as to make sure that we're not over distorting on that transient. We've only got it at like a 45% mix here. At 100%, we're here. Right, absolutely crushing the hell out of it. But again, it gives it sustain. Putting the saturation on the super compressed signal really brings out a lot of the character in the sustain, and it really helps the snare continue to be heard. And then we're just volume balancing on the other side of the plugin with the utility here. The extra samples I don't believe have anything on them. The impact snare has a gate just to control the amount of ring heard from the room, because the room that's in it is really live. So without the gate, and with the gate, it does a lot to make sure that the snare isn't just like consistently ringing over everything else that's happening. Crew sample doesn't have anything to it, it's just volume balanced in, and then the group is also volume balanced just a little bit after having, you know, set up the initial levels. The bus just has the stock glue compressor from Ableton, really only giving, I don't even think I'm getting 5 decibels. We have medium attack, medium release at a 4:1 ratio, and this is just to create a little bit of glue between all of the different things here. The bottom and the trigger don't have anything done to them. They really hardly ever give me any problems, so it's not something that I usually have to mess with. So this glue compressor is, yeah, like barely giving like 2.5 to 3 decibels. It's just giving them a light squish together. And then we're pulling out a little bit more of that mid ring here, bringing up a little bit of high end, get some of that sizzle, and then rolling off over 13K, just to make sure that you want air in the snare drum. You just don't want it to be eating up potential space where the cymbals are supposed to be existing. So it just sounds a little bit more focused. I think the toms have the least amount of everything going on. Each of them has an EQ that is doing a massive scoop, and this is just experimenting with the shells and doing whatever I had to in order to make them sound the way I wanted them to. So the shells, the toms all have, that's tom 1, tom 2, floor 1, floor 2, and floor 3, so you can see what I'm talking about. So they all have a massive scoop in the mids and then a bump in the transient spot where the actual stick attack is. Obviously some of them have a little bit more work done than others, especially these larger toms. But the idea is the same, is just to scoop the shit out of each of the shells and then make sure that you don't lose the stick attack. Right, so if we take all of these off, floor 1 has a gate on it because, as you can see, it tends to ring a whole bunch, and that information absolutely gets in the way. So I just have a gate there to control the amount of ring that comes off of it. So without the bus information, right? And then we put the EQs back on. Completely changes everything. So then we have that. Again, we have all the toms running into a stereo instance of CLA3A. This we're not pushing too hard. We're not getting more than like 4 decibels with this one. And then we have that run into Pro MB. And this is just a low end. This is just low end control. This is making sure that after each of these toms is hit, the low end is heard and then is ducked out of the way. It's set up in expand mode and is triggered off of the stick attack area. And is just very immediately holding down the low end after the attacks. And then we have utility monoing everything under 71 hertz just to make sure that the low end focus is nice and centered in our stereo field. From there, we've got our cymbal bus. Cymbal bus itself doesn't have anything on it. Each of these guys has a little bit of stuff going on though. For whatever reason, when this bounced, I must have accidentally clicked the phase button on the ride because it exported on the entirely wrong side of the kit. So we're using utility to flip the phase and put it on the left side, or on the right side as opposed to the left side. So without it on, it's over on the left side for some reason. So we just have the phase flipped in order to put it on the other side. We have that running into LA3A just to, it wasn't, the attack of the ride in the original song is very, very prominent. And so this being the ride spot mic, I really wanted to make sure that I was able to capture that and keep that ride as a focal point anytime that it is used. And just bringing it up in volume didn't give it the same effect. So it obviously needed a little bit more of the sustain in order to keep it relevant. So we use the compressor instead. And then we're just EQing the hell out of it to get some of that ring out of it and keep it focused on that transient information. Similar idea here with the FX cymbals. We just have them running into LA3A to get some sustain out of them and make sure that they're a little bit more present. Because they're very background. Very, very far in the background. And again, when you're throwing accent cymbals into the middle of a fill, like is the case in this track, you really want to make sure that you can hear them. So only getting about 2 decibels of reduction here, but it's doing a ton of work to bring everything together. And then we got the overheads, and it looks like the overheads in this one are just EQ'd. So we're rolling out a bunch of the low end of the kick drum. We are scooping a whole bunch of the mid in order to keep... There's a lot of snare drum in the overheads in Invasion, so this just kind of tames that. A little bit of boost in the upper mids and a nice boost around 12K to make sure that the cymbals are nice and bright. Yeah, without the EQ, it sounds very thuddy. It sounds kind of dead. Not really super enjoyable. The rooms on the close room, we have it running through the CLA 76 on the Blackie side. Releases all the way up. We got a middle of the road attack, and we're probably only getting like a decibel or two here. Okay, so this is just capping transients essentially, keeping everything from being too spiky. Because one of the things that I have found is that a big part of making your drums sound the way you really want them is not in the spot mics, but is in the representation of the rooms and of the overheads. Can't stress enough how important rooms are. And with that said, we have a bunch of... there's not too much processing on the drum bus itself. We're running the entire kit through VMR into the Monster compressor here. Not really doing a whole lot. We've got punch. We've got the punch button on. Attack is all the way down. Release is all the way up. We are high passing at about 60 hertz, and the mix is at about 30%. So turn these off real quick. So without this, this really brings the cymbals to life. So here at 100%, it's going to sound crazy. So we're bringing down to 30 where we just were. Just kind of fills some of what seems like empty space in the sonic footprint. Then we're pushing it through Slate Digital's Fresh Air, which gives a huge boost. The cymbals get a nice shine to them, and the kick drum really starts to be like singing through and cutting through the rest of the drum mix the way that you'd really want it to. It brightens up the drums, makes them super, super, super nice. This is kind of a wild looking EQ if I'm being honest with you guys. So rolling off some super, super low end just to keep the kick from being too boomy. Pushing a little bit of that transient though, because as you roll off the low end, you're going to lose a little bit of what's going on here. So pushing up the transient of the kick. I am unsure of what this is. Let's find out together. Oh, this is a ring in one of the toms that I could not get rid of correctly. This very clearly did the job. This is in the final mix, so I'm not going to freak out about it. It is what it is. Sometimes you just make decisions that have to be made, and it's not dumb if it works. So we've got some mid-focusing going on here, trying to cut out some of the probably overall like ring in things. Yeah, really trying to keep things focused on the transient information and less on the ring with all of this. And then again, we're doing a nice boost above 5.5K with some taming in 12 just to keep it from being too harsh. Without it, just focusing, just getting it all nice and focused. With that said, there are a bunch of buses that the individual shells are sent to. So we have an attack bus, a sustain bus, a distortion bus, and a room bus. The attack bus is a focused bus on all of these are going to be just shells that are sent to them. The attack bus is focused on just that, is adding more attack that you can blend in with the shells. So we have an EQ that is taming some of the transient information on the snare to make sure that we're not oversaturating and distorting on that. We have that running into FabFilter Saturn 2, cranked all the way on warm tube, and we're pushing it in an extra 17 decibels. So we are cranking the hell out of this plugin in order to get some nice broken up sounds, to get those transients nice and sharp. And then we're running that into the VMR distressor model. We've got the high pass and the band and the bell on the nuke ratio, so we're crushing the shit out of this. Running it in at almost 9. Attack is all the way up, so we got, I believe this is fast attack, slow attack, fast release, and it's not crazy loud coming out of it, but it is already pretty hot considering the amount of input gain and gain reduction that we're getting here. But that's to create nice sharp transients that sonically are very sharp, but still have a decent amount of just a little bit of extra sustain to them. But we will take care of sustain as we move forward with a sustain bus, which is what's next here in the chain. And this is just the FET compressor. It's just the FET compressor with a utility before it to crank the volume because the input doesn't quite enable me to run things in as hard as I want to. So I put the gain bump before it so that my smaller adjustments are still within the area where I want to be forcing these sounds through. And then it's just volume balanced on the other side. And then we have the distortion bus, which very similar to the attack bus is just a shell focused bus where we're shelving off a bunch of low end, and again we're focusing out the transient information of the snare drum to make sure that we're not oversaturating and over distorting that transient information. We're running this into FabFilter Saturn 2, absolutely cranked on warm tape this time, but we're still pushing it in an extra 17 decibels, really working the plugin, and then creating sort of a cabinet on the other side of it, giving it a nice little band pass, scooping out a little bit of this higher mid area to create a distortion cabinet, like almost like running it through an amp. And again, volume balanced on the other side of the plugins. And then we have the room. So we're creating an extra room sound to go along with the drums. So we're burning it. We're absolutely burning it in Saturn. We're pushing this in an extra 15 decibels on top of the send on warm tape. And we're cutting out all the high end. Running that into the Monster, the same plugin that we're using on the drum bus. This time all the way up, full mix. Running that into another instance of Saturn on warm tube, and we're creating a bit of an EQ curve here where we're getting rid of most of the low end that's been created from all this extra saturation. And then we're running that into an EQ that is not quite creating a band pass, but we are creating that sort of filtered shape where we're keeping it all mid-focused and getting rid of some of this high end, getting rid of a bunch of the low end to try to give it a real room sound here. And then again, it's just volume balanced on the other side. So those guys all together create a lot. And then we have a dry bus, which is just the shells, no anything on it. This is just extra drum sound. And then, of course, we got to feed that. We also have to feed the whole drum mix into a reverb. And to do this, I'm actually crushing it with a limiter to try to make it as flat as possible before going through Valhalla Room with a dark room, not a terribly long tail here, not very much pre-delay. I don't really think pre-delay usually sounds all that great. And then we're running that into Pro Q3 just to create the EQ curve out of it that we want. We don't really need all of this low end reverbing. We want it to be mid-focused. And this is the whole drum mix, not just shells, whereas the dry through the room is all just shells. And it just gives another layer of dimension. So if we do the drum mix, and we get rid of the buses, those buses are doing a lot of lifting for the drums. They are absolutely crucial to creating the drum sound that is represented in this track and in a lot of the mixes that I've been doing. And that is going to round things out for the drums, so we can move to guitar and bass. All right, so for guitar and bass, this is going to be a whole lot simpler. We've got the bass DI. Bass was tracked with this right here, the black Epiphone T-Bird Goth bass that I have here. And the signal chain, we've got a DI brightener that I've got right here, and we're just running it straight through parallax. This is one of those things where I was using some tones for demo purposes as I was putting it together, and the tones just ended up being exactly what I was looking for as I moved. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we're using this DI brightener patch that I have here. It's compression, EQ, and more compression. So we're running it into Pro C2 to really, really flatten it all the way out. Make sure that we've got a really, really consistent signal. Running that into Pro MB, which this is our string noise control right here. This is similarly set up to how the low end punch thing was taken care of in the drums. So you have this set to expand and have the threshold set to where it just lets a little bit of string noise through when it happens and then immediately clamps back down on that high end. And it just creates a lot of, it helps create clarity and keeps all the noise out of the DI sound. Running that into VMR using the FG Neve style EQ, we have a massive, massive shelf here, adding tons of high end. We have a big bell at 3.2K, boosting almost 9 decibels. We are scooping the hell out of 700, getting rid of as much of that mid information as possible. And then we're just not messing with the low end at all. We're not high passing. We're not giving it a shelf or anything like that. And then we're running that into the CLA 76, just again to take all of that re-EQ'd information, balance it all out, and make sure we're staying nice and consistent. So one at a time with these guys. Oh, and then a gate on the end, just for, again, for more clarity. So one at a time here, we've got with the bass DI. And then running that into the Pro MB. Like I said, it cleans up the DI so much, and you don't want to completely get rid of the string sound, but having too much of it, especially stylistically in a track like this, it doesn't do good things for it. I have a couple hardcore, like super heavy hardcore projects that I've been working on that have significantly more string noise in them because it adds a character to the track that is necessary. It adds a level of messiness that is preferred and that makes sense in the context of that track. But for this track, having it be a little bit clearer, since everything is like 16th notes all the way through the entire track, you don't want lack of definition in those rhythms. Whereas something in the hardcore, like the more heavy hardcore stuff, is a lot of quarter notes, a lot of rhythms that have a lot more space in them. So having that sound to go into everything really doesn't mess with anything that's going on. And then we have that running into the Neve. And this is where most of the sauce is for the DI. Then we have that running into the 76. Getting somewhere between 3 and 5 decibels of reduction. And then we just have that gate on at the end for all the spaces where we've got like this. And then we're running that into Parallax. This is, I believe, a modified stock preset, like literally open the plugin, and I just messed with the EQ settings a little bit, getting rid of some of the lower mids here. I bet, yeah. And so as you can hear, there's a really, really horrible whistle frequency in there. This guy right here. So running that into this EQ and doing a bunch of shaping, this is the savior of this whole bass tone. So without it, terrible, awful, but with it, and you need just a little bit of it for it to continue to sound natural, if you will. But my God, is that just a destroyer for this tone? And that just happens. That's just something with this bass. It hasn't mattered what strings I use, what tuning I'm in. That area, that 24 to 2600 area on this bass, just makes so much noise. It just happens to be a resonant frequency in the instrument. And so it's something, anytime I use that bass in particular, it is something that I have to pay attention to. Other basses that I've used have a similar ringing frequency up in the mid to high 2K area. And it destroys what could be a great tone. And a lot of times you'll end up doing a bunch of moving around with your distortion and your gain staging and stuff to try to get rid of it. And I've found the best thing to do is just to EQ it out. Anything else, I lose the character of the tone that I'm looking for. Whereas grabbing this with a really steep, I think I have this at 36? Yeah, 36 decibels per octave. Just a nice steep curve to grab that one little section of the sonic footprint does wonders. And so I really liked the way that this tone and just blended with the guitars. We got a little bit of a fundamental focus here, boosting like 170-ish, rolling off some of the really, really low stuff, getting rid of everything below, like getting rid of more of things that are below like 70 hertz, just to try to keep it fundamental focused in the 100 hertz area, because below you get a lot of rumble, which is cool for some things. But again, with this track being like mostly picked 16th notes, you really want things to be nice and clear. You want nice note definition. You don't want a lot of hum and rumble. There is a shelf here at about 2.2 decibels. Again, just boosting that high, trying to keep that low end under control, because as you can see, the low end is plenty loud enough. So we're getting rid of a lot of this harshness in here, but keeping it nice and balanced with the rest of the sound. And then we're rolling off over 10K, because realistically anything over 10K is for cymbals and air that don't need to exist in this instrument this way. And then for the bus, we have some more EQ going on. More big mid scoop, more fundamental focus, a little bit more definition, like clarity and definition work here, and then boosting some of that upper mid stuff to make sure that all of the presence information for the bass doesn't get lost. We have that running into Pro MB. This is something that I've started using on pretty much all of my string instruments in varying degrees of intensity. But this just creates just like with how it was set up on the master chain, this just creates a nice sort of filler for the rest of the instrument. Yeah, adds some nice character, really fleshes things out well. This is clearly just some secondary clarity work, scooping out all this stuff at 19 hertz up into the 50 range, really just trying to get rid of the boominess and rumbliness of the bass that isn't focused, and then doing another mid scoop. Helping keep the bass sound nice and focused. And then this is a side chain for the kick. We have it moving. I think most of these are stock. We have it externally reading the side chain, and we're side chaining to the click information from the kick where the the beater attack is, and just have it ducking here. Nothing crazy. Extended range just a little bit. We're still at a 4-to-1 ratio. Nothing crazy. Just trying to create space for the kick in the low end. And then moving to guitars, we have the mains and we have the harmonies. So the tone is going to be the same for both of these guys. We have some DI EQ work here. Yeah, and it's just trying to give us some focus on this mid area here, getting rid of a bunch of extra string slap sounds or anything above 6K, scooping out some of the higher mids that just didn't they just didn't sound good in the context of the tone. And then the tone is a just modified default preset for the Gojira, the Neural DSP Gojira plugin. Big mid focus, medium gain, making sure that the presence isn't cranked too much. The depth is up pretty high because it actually really helped fill out the sound. This track, I believe, is in drop B flat, so it just needed a little bit. Didn't need it. I preferred having the depth up because it created a nice thickness in the guitar sound without the bass being there, so that when the bass comes in, you get this really beautiful, like creamy low end that's nice and full, that has a lot of texture to it, and that's it for this. None of these, I believe, were on. We do have the overdrive on, just a little bit of distortion, low end on the tone. I believe this is the stock position for the volume level. Just helps create a little bit of the sharpness. A small bump down on the 65 hertz area. Here we have like just a little bit, like we have such minimal motions on the EQ inside of the plugin. So bringing down a little bit of that 65, 1 decibel at 250, 1.3 at 500, just to give it a little bit of a smile in that lower mid area. 0.9 at 4K, just because there's a lot of harshness in the 2 to 4K area, and then a boost of 1.6 at 8K, and that is 8K 7 to 9-ish areas where you're going to find a lot of presence for guitars, and so that's what we got going on here. 16K no touch. This is the stock cabinet. And then I know I have the reverb running here, only at about 20%. The high and low pass are dead nuts in the middle. And the time is just enough to give it something to make it feel like it's genuinely in a room somewhere. It is a little bit long. Maybe it's not a room, maybe it's a concert hall, but it gives it a nice, very real feeling. And that is going to be the same across to the other side. And then we have those running into JST Clip, which I think just gave the guitars a level of intensity that they simply did not have. Yeah, it gives them a fullness that they just did not have before. Then we're running into a very minimal EQ, bumping up some of this 200 to 300 area, scooping out a bunch more 700. We're scooping out some 27 and scooping out some 13K. Just making room, getting rid of harsh frequencies, things that just didn't sound right. Making it a much more focused sound. And then this is an extra sidechain that we have specifically for the main guitars. This, I believe, is just on during the chorus sections. Yeah. And this is just to help create extra space. Really just to help create extra space and clarity with those 16th note patterns that are throughout the whole song, but specifically here in that chorus section. Now the harmonies, I do believe, are the same tone. Same tone with the depth turned back down, because we don't need, for all this high-end stuff here, we don't need all that extra low. So we have the same tone with the depth turned down. Overdrive is still on in the same position. EQ is the same here. Cab is the same. Reverb is the same. So then we're running that into a huge bandpass because of where these notes exist. We didn't need any of this stuff, and we really wanted it to stay as focused on those mid-range frequencies as possible. So this is both a bandpass for clarity and then a bunch of mid scooping for shaping the tone around the notes we want to hear. This also is shaping for making sure it cuts through the mix the right way. Because we want those notes to be sort of focused here, whereas the mains we want focused more in this area. So we really had to create separation via the EQ for those things. And then the main harmonies that are doing all this melodic work are also both run into the LA2A. Catching almost 5 decibels of reduction on the palm muted stuff, but overall nothing too crazy. These guys, it looks like, just have that same bandpass idea. Same reverb, same cab, same EQ, same amp, less depth, same overdrive. And these are like the extra background guitars in the pre-chorus. So this guy didn't really have anything crazy going on. Same sort of bandpass mid-focus joint we got going on here. This guy, I believe, has the phaser on. Yeah, this is the phaser that is built into the Gojira plugin. This has even less depth than the other ones have. Like, it has even more of it taken out than the others did. This EQ is almost completely flat. We have half a decibel at 500. We still have the same reverb. I think the time might actually be turned down a little bit on this one. And that's just for this guy specifically. And so those are all run into a compressor that is actually a sidechain. So just a little bit of compression, trying to keep more clarity along with the because this is, again, 16th note based everything. We really want to keep that as tight as possible. Make sure that it feels like everything is moving in the same rhythm anytime that it's supposed to be. And so both of those groups, the harmony group and the main group, are run into the guitar group, which has the same sort of several band, multi-band compressor going on here, where we're really, really pushing the volume of the palm muted areas. Because so much of this track is palm muted, we really wanted to make sure that that sounded nice and tight and nice and focused. Those are being fed into an EQ where we're doing a whole lot of control on that low end, that 120, 200 hertz area, really, really trying to hold down this low end, giving it a nice. This is another trick from one of the Buster Otoholm Nail the Mix sessions, utilizing the mid channel and giving everything a boost there. It helps make sure that things speak more clearly on any sort of mono device, so like a Bluetooth speaker, on a phone speaker. This is what's going to ultimately help make sure that everything in the instrumentation is speaking clearly through one of those smaller speakers. It does a ton of work for this. And then we're cutting everything over 9K at a 12 decibel per octave. Nothing super, super steep, but again, anything over that is realistically space for drums and cymbals, and so we don't want to be taking that up with guitar hissing and stuff like that. And then that is also run into another sidechain through Pro MB. Again, externally reading and having it on the free bandwidth area so that you can specify that you want it to be reading from the clicky areas of the kick and reacting to the fastest moving part and fastest moving sound of the kick. So individually, we take these out, running into this Pro MB first. Right, this just adds fullness. This EQ is doing a massive amount of work for our guitar sound. And then we have that run into the sidechain. Both the guitar and the bass are run into a strings group right here. It's not named, but it's run into a strings group where I have it running through this running into the FG-MU, which is currently in mid-side mode. So we're helping to create more clarity and definition between our stereo field and our mono field. And that is run into an EQ that is just barely cutting out some 1K here. So without these, this bus sounds like this. It really gives the string buses a nice amount of width that just simply wasn't there before. All of those are run into an instrument bus. So the drums, the guitar, and bass are all run into their own bus in case I wanted to do any individual processing to just those, which it looks like before it went out I did not want to do. And that leaves us with vocals. So with the vocal stuff, it's going to be pretty consistent. The clean and screams both have essentially the same plugin chain on them, just slightly modified. So we'll look at, I don't think any of these individual tracks have anything on them. The doubles are limited just to create some fullness and consistency in the volume for them. They are placed 23 and 23 in terms of left and right panning. So
take this life! Take this life! Take this life! Useless! Useless!
And the doubles and the mains have the exact same plugin chain on them, with the mains having an instance of Soothe on them and the doubles not having that, just to create a little bit, like a little bit of a difference between the texture that exists between the mains and the doubles. Yeah, these three individual tracks, this has some volume ducking on the automation for some very specific parts. And it's literally just here at the end with the final scream on the way out. So the plugin chain for the mains, a whole bunch of shiz. So first of all,
yes, that's how much that paid! Yes, that's how much that paid! That's why the actual knife!
alright, first things first, we got an EQ. Cutting everything below 166 hertz. We got a small little bitty bump at 650. We are scooping out 2K where there's a bunch of like gross harshness, and then we're shelving off above 13, again just to kind of create space for drums. We're running that into a de-esser. Pro DS is phenomenal. The only thing I usually ever change is whether it's running single vocal or all around. I have this one running as a single vocal, and I like the way that it's working. This is a stock default, open the plugin and go, move on situation. And then we have VMR on. We're running this into the distressor on Nuke. We are boosting a bunch of, what is this, like 7K, almost 8K, boosting a bunch of 8K, boosting some 2.5 with a pretty wide bell here. We are boosting a little bit of 650, and then not even bothering with the low end stuff, no low filter. And then we're just volume balancing on the other side of it. So without this,
yes, that's how much that paid! That's why the actual knife! Yes, that's how much that paid! That's why the actual knife!
just adding meat, lots of compressing the absolute hell out of it, adding some meat to it, making sure it stays nice and bright, and then we're feeding that into Decapitator. Punish is off. We've got it opened all the way up. The tone is on the dark side, and we're looking at roughly like a 60-ish% wet mix here. So without...
Yes, that's how much that paid! That's why the actual knife! Yes, that's how much that paid! That's why the actual knife!
And this is just creating a nice little bit of grit in like the mid to low. With it on the dark side of the tone, it's not creating a whole bunch of extra high end, but it's helping make sure that the low mids are nice and crunchy.
Yes, that's how much that paid! Yes, that's how much that paid! Yes, that's how much that paid! That's why the actual knife!
We're running that into the same crazy multi-band idea here. I don't know that we're compressing it too hard.
Yes, that's how much that paid!
Yeah, we're getting about 6 decibels here in the middle.
Yes, that's how much that paid! That's why the actual knife! Yes, that's how much that paid! That's why the actual knife! Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife.
Which again is just this helps flesh out any sound. Utilizing this in whatever varying degree you need to in terms of placement of these like sections of the compressor, the different bands that you're using. This idea does so much work in terms of creating like meat in any track. We have that rolling into an EQ, cutting a bunch of 9 to 10. Really, this is like between 6 and 12, 6 and 15. Getting rid of a lot of this super high end stuff. We've got a shelf here that is helping just create more brightness. We're boosting this 2.5 area here to try to create more clarity and note definition, with most of this track being high pitched, like high screams. This is where most of it's going to exist. A lot of this stuff just gets in the way, so we're scooping out a bunch of this 450 to 500 area.
Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife. Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife.
It does feel like it gets a little bit thin, but ultimately in the context of the mix, having it thinned out a little bit actually helps it sit exactly in the right spot. We're running that into OTT, which this looks stock on the upward and downward. It doesn't look like the bands are moved. We're just sitting at about 17%, pushing it in at about 10 decibels and then bringing it back down about 7. So without it on.
Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife. Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife. Pretending the picture is perfect. I got myself to sleep.
Yeah, and then without it creating too much low end.
Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife. Pretending the picture is perfect.
It's adding a lot of clarity and adding some more meat. Running that through fresh air, just on 1515 with a single decibel of trim, just to give it some brightness.
Yes, that's how much the pain. Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife. Pretending the picture is perfect. I got myself to sleep.
Yeah, it's adding more like air than anything. Then we have that running into Soothe 2, which this is on a default preset, and just the depth and sharpness and stuff is what's messed with.
Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife. Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife. Pretending the picture is perfect.
And we're only at a 56% mix. This is not at 100. 100% process just didn't really sound like what I wanted.
Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife. Yes, that's how much the pain. That's why the actual knife. Pretending the picture is perfect. I got myself to sleep. Yes, that's how much the pain.
And that is the whole chain. I have a limiter on here, ceilinged at 0.3 like negative 0.3, pushed in at 2 decibels, just to try to get a little bit more consistency in the volume overall. Some things were a little bit weird in the final areas of mixing, and this was the thing that gave me the best result in terms of keeping the volume of the vocals where I really wanted it. And the chain is almost, I think, is identical in the cleans. Yeah, it just doesn't have the same, this little volume guy right here, which this is used in a couple spots just for boosting this last line.
I'm right here.
Just for boosting that. So same idea, different EQ though. Very, 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 very different. Because instead of wanting all the focus here on the high end, we want the focus, this vocal part was very much close to my speaking range. So most of the tonality, most of the notes exist in this lower area. So we're pulling tons of high end out of here.
I'm right here.
Oh, we got some stuff on these individual layers. That's right. The main clean has a bandpass on it with a little bit of focusing, and it's actually running into Ubermod, because the original vocal track has a very weird like phasey effect on it, but putting like a phaser on this didn't really sound right, so I went with something a little bit different. This is more of a chorus effect than it is a phase effect. Obviously at 100% it sounds crazy.
I'm right here.
It's got just like a little bit of wiggle to it.
I'm right here. Stay a while and breathe me in.
We had it at what, 17.6?
I'm right here. Stay a while and breathe me in.
And then just to keep the volume from clipping, we've got the limiter here at 0.3 with no extra gain push. There were just a couple spots where it was getting a little bit hot. The main secondary has a similar bandpass, but with a whole bunch more of the mid scooped out of it, and is running through a doubler so that we can have
I'm right here.
some more weird effect.
I'm right here.
And then again, we're running into the DS, running into hella compression, boosting all the same areas just at different amounts, with no trim.
I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here.
Running that into Decapitator at a lower drive, and we have the cuts up. So we're band passing into like the mid focus area here, and we're on the bright side instead of the dark side. Considering, like I said, the actual notes that are being used here are pretty low in terms of frequency spectrum, so I didn't need extra grit in the low end. I wanted to brighten things up. We're also only at about a 40-ish% mix, so it was a little bit different in terms of settings, but still running into the same Decapitator setup.
I'm right here. I'm right here. Stay a while and breathe me in.
It's not doing a whole lot, but it is just giving us a little bit more texture. We're gonna have the same. This looks like the same exact setup as the screams.
I'm right here. Stay a while and breathe me in.
Yep, just getting about 6 decibels across the midsection. Same EQ curve here, because we want to create consistency between all the vocal tracks.
I'm right here. Stay a while and breathe me in.
And again, it kind of creates like thinness, but ultimately that helps it sit into this track a whole lot better. OTT with the exact same settings, 17%, 100% here all the way. None of these are moved. 10 in, 7.5 out.
I'm right here. I'm right here.
Same 15-15 -1 on the fresh air.
I'm right here.
And same depth settings and 56% mix on the soothe.
I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here.
And then on the main, we've got just another EQ for the whole bus.
I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here.
And this again, this was all about trying to create some mid focus to really keep the vocal heard in the right frequency range inside of the track.
I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm right here. Make me understand you, therefore me. Make me understand you, therefore me. Take this life. I'm right here.
Yeah, and then and that's everything for the vocals. Oh, it is run into Vintage Verb at the very end for the very last scream. for this. And it's just a gradual reverb throw over the course of the whole scream so that it sort of fades out into the background and then comes back to dry at the very, very end, so there's not too much, you don't have a whole bunch of ring from it. So that wraps up everything but the buses for the vocals. There's a wide bus and 2 different verbs. So the vocal wide is a multi-band compressor with OTT, squishing the hell out of it with a limiter, giving it some volume boost into wider, the Polyverse plugin. So that sounds like this.
Take this life. I'm right here.
It has just a little bit of the clean in it because the clean vocals already have a doubled track. So it doesn't have a lot of it in there, but this was mainly for giving the screams some width.
Take this life. Take this life.
The first vocal verb, same idea. We're crushing it so that it's a nice consistent signal. Running that into Valhalla Room, medium-sized room with less than 2 seconds of decay. Nothing too crazy. We just wanted to give it its own space. And running it through a de-esser to get rid of some of the harshness that comes through with putting it through a reverb. And this is also just for the screams. Because then we have a clean vocal verb, boosting the volume input, giving it a sort of bandpass idea for the EQ, running it into a dark room with a much longer decay, and then just doing some shaping, some mid-focus shaping here with an EQ on the other side.
I'm right here. Stay a while and breathe me in.
So with all 3 of them,
Take this life. I'm right here. Stay a while and breathe me in.
and with those buses taken care of, that is the whole track. So, all those things said, that is the entirety of this mix breakdown. I hope that it was informative. I hope that some of the information is, helpful in terms of enabling you to, hear somebody do something and then try to create that for yourself in your own mixes. Always happy to answer any questions if anybody wants to ask things down in the comments. And thank you guys for sticking around. I very much appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.